So here's the framework that I tell people, and this is kind of how we built like our own offering within Blazel is, first of all, here's your litmus test. Could only you have written this post? And I mean like you, as in, are you sharing something like a unique perspective that only Carl could understand, right? So that's kind of step one. Then step two is your content needs to do one of four things. It either needs to educate, inspire, entertain, or persuade. And if your content can't do one of those four things, then I would label it as like a so what kind of post. And so what is like the death of content, is the death of storytelling. It's the stuff that gets overlooked, that has very little engagement, that no one cares, that you somehow clicked and read it and you went, why did I waste my time reading that?
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with the stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Bigelow. She is the CMO at Blazel, grew a YouTube channel to over 120 million views, loves content marketing, and is a mom to two little kiddos. Congrats on your success with Blazel, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Carl. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about something that's really prevalent in today's market, which is the importance of storytelling and building trust at scale, especially with what's going on with AI and how much content is often considered slop is out there. So how do you work around all the noise and help people actually build trust at scale with storytelling? Because it seems like there's a lack of trust in general, and this is more valuable than ever. So tell us some of your secrets and how you're helping people.
Yeah, so I think that first, maybe it would make sense to take a step back and talk about why storytelling is so important. I think storytelling is something that's deeply human and creates this emotional connection, bonds us to other people, builds trust within relationships. And so part of the reason why storytelling feels more important now more than ever is because of this prevalence of AI, where anyone can kind of be a shallow expert at anything. It's so easy to put out kind of mediocre, crappy AI slop content. And so the people who are able to leverage storytelling to build these authentic relationships are going to win in an oversized way. And so that's really the thesis that we're operating on at Blazel, and kind of the way we've built the platform around it. But this is something that I've embodied and have leaned into long before kind of my tenure here. And so if we look at like you referenced the YouTube channel, like how did I grow that YouTube channel to so big? We just told fun, interesting stories. And so you have to kind of center yourself around who's the audience that you're trying to reach as like the step one of that. And so for that YouTube channel, my audience was 4-year-olds, like it was like kids between the age of like 2.5 to 5 years old, let's say. And so I had to understand what was it that was really interesting to them. What did they care about? Like I spent a ton of time watching popular cartoons of the day and understanding like how they used repetition or how they kind of spark curiosity in kids, or kind of all the different mechanisms that these shows were watching. I was like looking at what was trending across YouTube, I was doing a ton of research and understanding like what was it that kids cared about. These same principles apply whether you're trying to target a 3-year-old or you're trying to target the CISO of a Fortune 500 company. You need to understand what they find interesting, what makes them tick, what problems they have, and you can start to build stories and narratives around those topics.
Yeah, and it's something that I think it's so often overlooked because of how fundamental it is to the human experience and how our brains work and how we organize information in narrative format. We think in stories. We're just naturally wired for storytelling on such a fundamental level that when you go to think about what this piece of content I need to make, you don't realize how powerful those stories can be. And also and I really appreciate what you said about understanding your audience first, because I think a lot of people, when they think of stories, they go, oh, here's the story I want to tell that I'm really excited about. And they make the mistake of starting from there instead of understanding the audience and going, okay, we were trying to reach this audience and we want to have them feel this way when they're done hearing the story. Now let's work backwards to figure out what we need to tell them and how we need to tell it in order to get that result. And that way of approaching it is so often the opposite of the way people, especially in the business world, are thinking.
Yeah. It's funny as, we've had, when we work at Blazel, we help people post content on LinkedIn, right? And so I've coached hundreds of companies now around how to build audience engagement on LinkedIn. And I really like LinkedIn as a content platform in general. But one of the mistakes I see people make all the time is that they talk about themselves. It's all about them and what they're doing and the things they're excited about. It's like, there was something that was just drilled into my brain. My very first job I ever took, I had a manager, and she would constantly say, Caitlin, what is in it for me? What is in it for me? Why should I care at all about what it is that you're having to say? And I have taken that with me forever, which is content should be around providing value to people, giving them insights, showing, you can show that you're an expert and you can show that you have creative solutions to the problems people have without just talking about your product or service. Another way to frame it is there's a reason why you have to pay for paid ads, right? It's because no one likes being advertised to. And this is where I think companies and individuals can do some really creative storytelling to get their product or service out there in a way that doesn't feel salesy, right? And so one way that companies are doing this is doing like the build in public, where they're sharing insights. Like I think about Blazel almost like as a character in a play. And I think about how can I weave Blazel into the story without it being about Blazel and the services that we do. And so I might talk about insights or shared data that we've surfaced internally through the Blazel app and share it in an interesting way that's helpful for people. Or I might talk about the feature that got used more than I was expecting it and why that was surprising to me. Or I'm talking about, a change in direction or a pivot that the company had to make and why that was painful and like the learnings that kind of came out of it. All of those are ways for people to kind of get exposure to the company and brand and understand and learn a little bit more about Blazel without me saying, this is what Blazel does. This is the problem we solve. You should come try Blazel. Come book the demo with us, right? Like no one wants to hear that.
Yeah, just the way you presented that last the contrast there of naturally explaining your experience and what it means for the people using it and how it's not about just your message, but here's like the user experience and the interaction and the relationships you're having with people using the app versus that very stilted, siloed, like hit the key talking points in a marketing message. Or I can even see just like the kind of carousel, like clicking through all the slides of just like the steps that are so obviously salesy, and you can just feel people's disinterest grow, and eventually they're going to either scroll past it or click away, because that's just not how people communicate, and it's not how a story works. If you went into like a movie theater and then someone just kind of read you a plot synopsis of this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, that's just, and then like the end, you'd want your money back and you wouldn't enjoy it. But it's about the emotions and understanding the characters and the connections and the challenges and the feelings involved. And I think that's one of the main things that when you see like the AI content, it can't capture that authentic feeling, that experience, because it doesn't have those. It's not a human being with a brain who actually has lived experiences, and so you can't communicate that in a way that comes across as authentic and real, because even if people can't put their finger on why it doesn't come across as like, they can tell something's missing without necessarily being understanding all the psychology behind it, but they can tell when it's kind of hollow and lacking that genuine human element, and it's the stories that people actually experienced are just ring so much more powerfully than the obviously stilted marketing messages.
So here's the framework that I tell people, and this is kind of how we built like our own offering within Blazel is, first of all, here's your litmus test. Could only you have written this post? And I mean like you, as in, are you sharing something like a unique perspective that only Carl could understand, right? So that's kind of step one. Then step two is your content needs to do one of four things. It either needs to educate, inspire, entertain, or persuade. And if your content can't do one of those four things, then I would label it as like a so what kind of post. And so what is like the death of content, is the death of storytelling. It's the stuff that gets overlooked, that has very little engagement, that no one cares, that you somehow clicked and read it and you went, why did I waste my time reading that? I didn't get anything of value out of it. And so that's kind of my own little personal litmus test that I use, which is like, is this coming from Caitlin's unique, like lived perspective? Could only Caitlin have come up with this? Is there some kind of detail in this post that Caitlin would have had to have shared to get this? And then does the content meet one of those four criteria points?
Yeah, I like that. And it's stuff that I still struggle with it with my own content. I admit my content, especially on LinkedIn, is just like I'm not the best at that stuff. So I'm really, and like it's one of the kind of like the cobbler's kids don't have any shoes sort of thing, where like I understand it, but just like when it comes to actually creating it, it's like I still struggle with it sometimes. But it's but yeah, the understanding, and I think also it comes from like this being that it can be hard for a lot of people, I think, to put themselves out there so much, because it's so being vulnerable and having something to really be, always have that inner voice of like, oh, no one's going to care about this. No, it's not worth sharing. But we forget that from the other perspective, if you think about it from the audience, like the thing that no one's going to care about is the part that people are actually really craving to hear more from you, because that's what they actually connects you with them. And even if you're aware of like that's what's going on in your brain, it's still so hard to override that voice in your own head. And so besides the audience getting value from this episode, I feel like I'm getting some great like feedback on my own things I can do better. And because it's something that it's important to understand that even if you're like aware of these things on an intellectual level, being able to read and feel and understand the voices that are going on inside that kind of try and keep you from doing this because of how scary it can seem to be vulnerable, or how like feeling like exposed to the public. Being able to overcome those is a necessary step, and it's not just a thing you can do once and it's okay, I'm never going to have that feeling, because the next post you make, it's going to come back.
I still feel that way, Carl. It doesn't go away, but I will tell you something that will make you feel better. So summer of last year, almost exactly a year ago, I decided I wanted to pivot how I was using LinkedIn. So historically, I had been in the prop tech industry, so like kind of real estate technology. And I wanted to pivot out of talking about that. And I wanted to start talking about marketing, because I felt like, okay, I think LinkedIn could be a really valuable platform for me to get clients. And so I need to show that I'm a thought leader in marketing and that I have interesting marketing insights. And so my audience had been built around all these people that followed me because I used to talk about real estate. And now I didn't want to talk about real estate anymore. And so when I started posting, my content had horrible engagement, really horrible, like single digit likes. And it was really embarrassing for me, because I valued myself as someone who was really good at content and really good at marketing. And at the time I was even ghostwriting for a few people, and the content was performing really, really well. And so I'm like, why can't I do this for myself? Right. It got to the point where I was feeling so awkward about this whole thing that I would even ask my mom my mom and I have a different last name. And so I would ask her, like, Mom, can you like comment and like on this? Because like no one's saying anything. And it was embarrassing to me. And it took me about 3 months of posting. I posted 5 days a week. And I think part of it is stubbornness, part of it is competitiveness, and part of it is I just really wanted to prove that I could do it. And so I set a goal for myself and I said, okay, I'm going to do it every day for 5 days a week for 3 months. And it was incredible. It takes LinkedIn some time to recognize that you're talking about new topics and like reestablishing your pillars. It takes some time to kind of curate and build a new audience about things, like signaling that it's a new topic. But since I joined Blazel, it's been about 8 months, I've grown my followers by over 7,000 people. And I didn't do it with lead magnets or clickbaity things or whatever. I literally just told stories. And that was it. And I just think about what are the interesting things about my day or the week, and what are the pieces that I think people would be interested in. And the posts that I've felt most vulnerable or most exposed tend to be the posts that perform the best. And I still have those moments where I post something and I go, oh my gosh, I hope people will engage with us. And that's just, you just have to figure out how to push past those feelings of discomfort. And I will tell you that being able to stomach that discomfort of, okay, I'm going to put myself out there and I'm willing to post, is actually a competitive advantage, because so few people are willing to do that, that you just naturally will have an edge in getting your story out there and getting your voice heard and building a larger audience for yourself.
Love it. Yeah, it's I can see how your experience with shifting from talking about real estate stuff to the marketing would have that initial dip in the performance, which can be like alarming when you see the numbers drop, because and the response and struggling to get those up. And I appreciate you sharing the asking your mom to engage with it, because that's definitely showing some vulnerability and is commendable for sharing that. And it's getting more of the personal stories in there. I think is something that, especially when you're in a corporate environment or like in a business environment, you don't think that you kind of have that beaten out of you in a way. People, you can't be talk about yourself. It has to be all like business and this is professional. And I think just that, in general, the idea of professionalism is such a like kind of restrictive and not really necessary, almost harmful concept. And then that having people show up more as themselves and celebrating their differences and their experiences and the humanity behind it is what we need for society and the business world in general, because there's that lack of human connection, lack of sense of self, or lack of self-expression is, I think, at the root of a lot of the issues in facing the country and the world today. And so I think it's cool that your approach to how people can contribute to bring more of themselves to their posts, their content, and the work they do is can seem like a small thing, but when done by enough people at scale, then it really can lead to a larger movement of human connection that the world needs. So that's really exciting. And so when you mentioned like the frameworkers thing is great. Is there like a first step or like a thing people can do if they realize, okay, I want to do this more? What's like the next or like the first step they should take to kind of, is it like collecting stories, or how do people get started with this process?
I mean, I think the number one thing is just commit to a goal. Commit to tell yourself, decide what your goal is. You need to be consistent, and you need to, like, I would say minimum twice a week. So you say like, okay, I'm going to post twice a week. I'm going to give this a real fair shot. And you're going to know that at the beginning, it's not going to go that well. And it's going to take some number of months. It took me 3 months posting 5 times a week. It's going to take some amount of months for you to figure out what's working, to get enough data to kind of play around with it. Right. And so I think that's step one. Step two is just recognizing that we each have inherently interesting, cool, fascinating things that are happening all around us. And we just have to open our eyes to recognize the things that are happening. Right. So Carl, you're having all these conversations with people who are experts at different things all throughout your week. You have things going on with your family. You have, like, we all have hobbies. We have things we're passionate about. I'm a I'm a mom with young kids. I love talking about my kids and my family and how that juxtaposes with the fact that I have this really intense corporate job that asks a lot of me. I work late nights. I work on weekends. I don't work at, quote unquote 996 in Silicon Valley, but I work really long hours, and it's really hard to do that with little kids, and like what that process is like and what that looks like. I tend to put kind of a funny self-deprecating narrative on top of the things I do, because that's just my style and how I do it. And so everyone will kind of have their own unique take on how to do this right.
So I'd love to hear some of the success stories you've had with the storytelling you've done at Blazel.
Sure. So there's been a couple like fun stories that have stood out for me. The first was I posted my very first day of joining Blazel. And so there's a few things on the platform that people really love to reward. They love rewarding like fundraising announcements, job announcements, kind of things like that. And so I figured that this would be a very popular post. And so I just poured a lot of emotion into it. I was very real with kind of how excited I was about the opportunity. I had a picture of myself, like how kids on the first day of school have like a little whiteboard or like a thing that's like, first day of school or whatever, first grade, whatever it is. So I did that. I said like first day as CMO, age 36. And I held my little piece of paper and I had my 2 kids with me and I took the picture. So that post went viral. And then what I did is I used the energy and the momentum from that to keep telling the story. So I think a lot of times people think about LinkedIn as just like a one-off post, but I was like, okay, what could I say day 2? And so day 2 was like, oh shit, my post went viral yesterday. Now people think I know what I'm doing at my new job. And it was like all the things that I was already screwing up and like getting wrong. Like I couldn't find the bathroom and I screwed up a podcast interview and like I got an investor's name wrong and like all the things that happened with like that first day. And so I just kind of took people through like this series, and then like every day my post was going viral because it was so, I think, relatable, right? Of like everyone has had that like first new job experience where you just feel like you're totally screwing up already and like, you're trying to orient yourself and whatnot. So that worked really well. The other kind of 2 stories that I did was coming out of the launch, like we were taking the company out of stealth. And so I did a series of ridiculous marketing tactics that were all in parody and jest. So I did something where I was like, T-5 days, I bought 5,000 branded pens, right? Or I ended up buying a billboard in Wichita, Kansas that I modeled after the AI billboards in San Francisco that made no sense. Just like the billboards here, it made no sense. It was completely non sequitur, dropped in the middle of Kansas, right? And so I was like sharing these things, but like people loved it. They loved the absurdity and like the storytelling and the momentum kind of going into it. And so all of those posts went viral and did really well for the company and generated, dozens and dozens of inbound leads when we finally came out and talked about what we were doing. The final one was we were planning to move out of our office. We had a co-working space we were in, and we were planning to move out of the co-working space in a couple months. And I said, okay, if we're actually moving out of the co-working space, maybe we could play that up and do like a series of guerrilla marketing tactics and pretend to get kicked out of our co-working space. And so I started doing things like we branded all the food in the kitchen with like Blazel stickers. And I took over the bathrooms with like flyers everywhere for like a webinar. I set up office hours in the elevator where I had like my laptop and I was giving people LinkedIn advice in the elevator as they were like going up and down the floors. And anyway, and then I was posting about all this and sharing it on LinkedIn, like, and people loved it. They thought it was hilarious, but they couldn't tell if it was real or not. Like, is she really doing these things? Is this all a joke? Like, that's part of the point, is like, I want to create conversation where people don't really know what's going on, right? Well, it turns out that the co-working space we were in really didn't like that I was doing these things. And we got to a place where our lease wasn't ready when we thought it needed to be ready. And we wanted to renew for multiple months. And they said, no, we actually are evicting you. Like, you are getting kicked out of the co-working space. And so here was kind of my joke goal, was to get kicked out of the co-working space, but we actually got kicked out of the co-working space. And, you know, I had emails then from their legal team that was saying like, you need to stop. We don't want you doing this anymore. And then again, that's just creates more content. So then I'd post, you know, I'd redact things and like post the email from the head of legal and kind of all these things. It made for this really funny story. And then when we finally moved into our real office, people were like, oh my God, that was real? Like everyone thought you were joking the whole time. You really got kicked out? And so you don't need big budgets to do fun storytelling. You can just think about things that are happening in your life and around you and figure out how to weave narratives around those things.
Love it. I love those examples, especially the fake eviction gag that turned into a real, like you kind of manifested that reality of we actually got ourselves kicked out by faking we got kicked out. So I love that. That's great. Thank you so much for connecting with me today, Caitlin. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a comment, and subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Caitlin, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.